When we think about human movement, we tend to picture the skeleton as a kind of biological puppet. To make an arm or leg move, muscles contract, pulling on tendons like strings to manipulate the bones into action. Because of this strictly mechanical perspective, we assume the only reason to pull those internal strings through exercise is to build physical endurance, or perhaps increase muscle mass. But that purely physical view misses a biological reality uncovered by neurobiologist Rita Levi-Montalcini. Her Nobel Prize-winning research mapped out the mechanics of what she called the flexible brain. She found that the intricate structure of our brain depends entirely on the activity of its nerve cells. If we stop challenging our bodies, the physical connections between those neurons actually begin to unravel, directly causing our cognitive and motor abilities to decline. Activating our muscles is a mandatory biological process to prevent the structural decay of the mind. Sculpting an aesthetic physique is entirely secondary. You might assume that running 3 miles on a treadmill every morning completely protects you from this neural decay. But physical activity impacts the brain through 2 entirely distinct biological mechanisms, and a highly repetitive routine only activates one of them. Repeating the same stride day after day leaves a massive portion of the brain's architecture unchallenged, and therefore vulnerable to the very unraveling Levi-Montalcini warned about. To protect our cognitive future, we have to recognize the difference between feeding the brain the biological fuel it needs to survive and supplying it with the novelty it needs to thrive. The first category of exercise involves monotonous, low to moderate intensity movements over time, like walking or jogging, or short bursts of high-intensity strength training. During these repetitive workouts, the skeletal muscles work intensely, forcing the body to consume massive amounts of oxygen and vital chemicals from the bloodstream. The cardiovascular system responds by dramatically increasing output across the entire body. This oxygen-rich blood surges upward, flooding the brain cavity with essential nutrients. This heavy oxygenation has a profound effect on maintaining neural networks. In medical settings, patients will sit inside pressurized hyperbaric chambers to achieve this exact same structural brain boost. But unless a person has restricted mobility, a consistent aerobic routine naturally produces this identical biological advantage at zero cost. Monotonous workouts provide the raw oxygen fuel necessary to maintain the physical hardware of the brain. But because the movements are familiar and repetitive, they offer almost nothing to upgrade the brain's software. Repeating a set pattern of movements puts the body on autopilot. This requires zero cognitive effort, leaving large sections of the brain inactive and susceptible to structural decay. The biological antidote to this decay is an unpredictable activity profile, specifically movements that demand balance, complex coordination, and fine motor skills. These activities rely entirely on the cerebellum, a specialized subcortical region at the base of the brain. This area processes the complex math required for involuntary movement much faster than our conscious awareness. To keep us upright, especially when we shift our weight or stand on one leg, the cerebellum continuously receives spatial reports streaming upward from the lower limbs. It instantly calculates and fires back instructions to contract multiple muscle groups so we don't fall over. The cerebellum also handles coordination tasks that require the brain to execute completely different movements simultaneously. We do this every time we drive a car, turning the steering wheel with our hands while our feet manage the brake and accelerator pedals. This same subcortical region governs our fine motor skills. Threading a needle requires calculating the exact trajectory of a moving thread as it closes the distance toward a stationary target. All this spatial math must be localized in the cerebellum. If this sensory information had to travel up into the conscious cortex to be processed, the entire completion of the task would slow down, making smooth coordination impossible. By exposing the body to unfamiliar, physically challenging tasks, we force massive areas of the brain to execute entirely new input-processing-output loops. This high-level effort actively forges new neural connections. Pulling our physiological strings does manipulate the limbs, but it also creates a feedback loop that wires the mind itself. A monotonous exercise routine is entirely necessary. It acts as an internal engine, supplying the brain's physical hardware with life-sustaining oxygen. But a healthy vascular system is only half the equation. Keeping the brain flexible and resilient demands frequent exposure to surprising physical challenges that break our routines. A robust cognitive future relies on balancing the physical endurance of repetitive workouts with the sudden subcortical shock of the unfamiliar.